This is the EMAT podcast. Hello and welcome to the Emergency Management Association of Texas EMAT podcast. I am your host, Aaron Ewing, Digital Media Specialist with the Harris County Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. Today's guest is Jeb Lacey, President of RS Network Consulting. Welcome, Jeb.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Jeb, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Certainly. Well, I'm an emergency management consultant. I've been in the emergency management profession for closing in on 20 years now at the federal level, and then at the local level as an emergency management coordinator. And then now I'm in the private sector. My company specializes primarily on providing emergency management services to small government agencies, and that tends to be small cities and school districts. And we've spent some time over the last half a decade or so trying to really get good at helping create emergency management programs when resources are limited, and helping school districts primarily in the state of Texas, but across the U.S. do just that. I'm a past president of EMAT. I did serve the organization as president for 2 terms. I'm currently the interim legislative chair with EMAT as well. I have a passion for emergency management in Texas and a passion for helping Texas emergency managers.
Excellent. All right, Jeb. So In your consulting, I hear you talking about small cities and school districts. Here in Harris County, we're working on local government, so we know what it's like to be on a shoestring budget. But I imagine that like schools and cities have even a smaller budget.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, the thing is that cities and home rule cities and school districts and things along those lines, all across the state of Texas, really have to live up to the same requirements that a Harris County has to live up to. And they look up at their big sister Harris County and say, well, how could we ever do what they do? With the skill pool and the resources and things along those lines. And we try to translate, some of those big picture projects and programs and things along those lines into something that's meaningful on a smaller scale, obviously, but still meaningful to our partners in the community and school districts, particularly. Schools. I mean, kids deserve an education, and kids deserve a safe education. And it doesn't matter whether your school district has 150 kids in it or 150,000 kids in it. Those kids deserve the same opportunity to learn and to grow and experience youth in a safe environment. One where if a hazard or a threat presents itself, the district is prepared to respond to and recover from it, and that they're doing the things that are necessary to, once again, on their scale, mitigate, the risk of those threats and hazards or prevent them from taking place. And so it's an exciting space to be in. It's exciting to help people create programs that they really, when they get into them, don't necessarily believe that they have the resources or the skill sets available to them to actually, create good programs. It's a rewarding experience to help them do that.
Absolutely. I wonder if you could speak a little bit to your experience in emergency management consulting. One of the hardest chores we have is to get people to realize that they have a vested interest in preparing for a disaster. When the power goes out, and half of the county is calling 911, emergency responders are not going to be able to come get you. So it's kind of up to you to be your own island of safety. Certainly, and the same applies even to small and rural communities. A small and rural community may depend on, for example, let's talk health.
may be depending entirely on the state for health services, including public health emergency response. And, they may be isolated, and be, hours or perhaps if it's a very widespread event, days away from support from some of those agencies that they depend on. And the same applies once again to school districts of all sizes. They have to have a capability to at least prepare for and mitigate, and then prevent or mitigate as much of the risk as possible, because once again, hazards and threats, we all face them. Doesn't matter where we are or how small or large, bad things happen. And so, it's important, I think, too. And I think our communities understand this importance, and our school districts of any size understand the importance of being prepared. But being able to equip them to do that is something we all have to do, as emergency managers. We've got emergency management coordinators in counties now who are getting a sneak peek into their emergency management programs of the school districts within their organizations or cities that they maybe weren't getting before. A big driver behind that is Senate Bill 11, which came through the 86th legislature. And mandated certain positions be represented on district safety and security committees. And so a lot of these emergency managers are out there. I've talked to plenty who are really getting their first peeks at the emergency management programs within the districts that they're serving. And others have great relationships and have well-founded collaboration mechanisms that go back many, many years. But just as many are just getting those first peeks into those programs and starting to be able to realize where they need to be able to contribute and assist and so on. So it's an exciting time.
And organizations can do a lot to prepare themselves for a situation without spending any money. Just getting together and talking about your plan and talking about mitigation, that can go a long way to having a better prepared organization.
Sure thing. And that also ties right back to Senate Bill 11 and that collaboration that I just cited a moment ago. A lot of folks out there, when they have, a challenging problem, they either, number one, they don't know who to bring to the table to help them. Or number two, they have a fear of exposure or a fear of maybe, letting the cat out of the bag that something hasn't been handled or things along those lines. And so, because a lot can be accomplished when you bring the right people to the table and give them the right tools and ask them to solve a problem. So seeing, in coming years, especially in emergency management in the K-12 world, and also in junior colleges and public and state universities, but in the K-12 world, particularly where we really feel there's a need that needs to be answered. It's remarkable to see what is being accomplished just in such a short period of time by bringing together all of these stakeholders and getting them engaged on some very specific tasks and asking them to do some very specific things. Obviously, we're going to see tremendous gain in collaboration in communities when it comes to emergency management in the K-12 space because of these mandates. And that's not to say that they're perfect either. There are certainly opportunities for collaboration that have been left out of the the kind of a mandatory equation. Looking at once again at Senate Bill 11, there's no requirement for fire and EMS, and there's no requirement for public health representation and things along those lines. And those are addressed in some ways in other areas of education code or government code and things. But at least we've got to start. At least we're moving in the right direction, and we're starting to get, more of a representative group together to start trying to find out the right way to address these issues, particularly in the K-12 space. It's promising.
Well, that's an excellent segue into your presentation. Your presentation title is School Safety and Security Committees, What EM Professionals Need to Know. Jeb, could you give us a little teaser on what EMAT members can expect at the conference?
Sure. So we're on our in the presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about what we've learned in K-12 schools over the last 5 or 6 years, and what emergency managers can expect when they're moving into what is not traditionally a public safety space. Educators and school education professionals, they're there to educate kids, and they see the world through a different lens than public safety professionals do. They have different goals, they have different dreams for their accomplishments, and you have to be able to appreciate those in order to be effective in this space. And so one of the things we're going to talk about is, obviously we're going to set the tone. We're going to talk about why, why the SB 11 was passed, particularly relating to these types of committees, and some of the history of some of the planning that's gone on in K-12 schools and our junior colleges and such in the state prior to. Then we're going to talk a lot about what emergency managers can expect when they start looking at these programs, and what a lot of especially the smaller or rural school district programs look like, so they know what to expect and they're not surprised. The other thing we're going to talk to them about in the presentation, which I think is a really important thing for all emergency managers to understand, is they have to try and at least put on their education hat. Mm-hmm. That they have to really try hard to appreciate the perspective that the overall goal of a school is not to contain children safely. Mm-hmm. The goal of a school is to provide a child with an education. Correct. Is to provide them with something that they can take forward in their life. And eventually, the goal of the school district is to take children and eventually, release them into the world as adults who are able to function efficiently in our society and have the tools necessary to pursue their dreams. And when you put that first, it changes your perspective on certain things when it comes to how you operate, what you give up in order to achieve those objectives. And sometimes that falls into the safety and security or the emergency management discussion. And the bottom line is that it's going to be important for emergency managers to take a step back and really think about the goals of the organization they're serving when they're trying to help them develop programs that serve the students, staff, and visitors of a school district while preserving the integrity of their educational experience.
Well, given the current state of things in our society, comprehensive school safety bill is probably one of the first steps into a paradigm shift and a change of way of thinking. So Jeb Lacey's presentation is in the school resiliency track, and he will be presenting on Monday, the 24th at 3:30 p.m. And we'll see you at the symposium.
See you there.
The EMAT Symposium is fast approaching. Visit www.emat-tx.org for more information. And don't forget to follow us on social media at Your EMAT. Again, that's at Your EMAT. And we'll see you at the symposium.